Hey everyone, it's Jason Arkles from the Sculptor's Funeral, and today I've got a little bit of a project going on in my studio. You see, I teach a lot of travel workshops around the world, and a lot of times I book into painting studios rather than sculpture studios, which is great, except for one thing. Generally, these painting studios are not equipped with the tools and equipment that sculptors need, and the biggest stumbling block for a lot of these painting studios is that they don't have sculpture modeling tripods, the little, things that sculptors make busts and figures on top of, kind of the easel version of what sculptors use. And so the problem is, of course, is that if you're going to buy them, the cheapest ones that are hardly worth buying are going to be $100 or more each. And sometimes I'm booking in a dozen people. So I have decided to come up with my own design for I don't want to say a temporary, but possibly a temporary, we'll see, tripod that is cheap, easy to make, and is very, very affordable. Hopefully under $20 or $30, euros, whatever currency you want to use. And I'm actually going to be spending hopefully $0 on the one I'm going to be building today. I'm just using some scrap material in my studio, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, if this works out, this is something that people all around the world can copy, and anytime you need to do a sculpture class or just want to fool around with some clay or wax, you have something to work on. All right, now let me switch to a microphone. It'll be easier for you to hear me. So here is my piece of scrap lumber. It's a piece of sort of MDF fiberboard, particle board sort of stuff. It's 22 millimeters thick, which is about 3/4 of an inch thick. And you want your material to be at least that thick, if not thicker. You could go an inch or 30 millimeters or whatever. The thickness of the material will add greatly to the stability of the entire piece, which you'll see in a minute. Okay, so basically, what you see are 4 pieces drawn out that I'm going to cut out of this one piece of board. Now, this piece of scrap that I have wasn't as big as I think I would have liked. This is about 75 centimeters by 130 centimeters. I really needed a little bit more than that. There's actually 5 pieces I'm going to need to cut out. The 5th piece I'm going to use from a separate piece of scrap that I have. In addition, I think I probably would have made some of these pieces a little bit longer in order to get a higher tripod. And let me sort of talk you through the design and what you're looking at and how you might be able to change it for your own purposes. Now you see those sort of 2 funnel pieces at the left of the board. Basically, that's going to be the base of the stand. The base is the wide part of the funnel. That's where it's going to meet the floor. And I think I have that at 50 centimeters across, and I think that's just fine. If you want to go to 60 centimeters across the bottom, that's fine. But the height, basically the distance from the base to the narrow end, from the wide end to the narrow end, I have at 80 centimeters. I think a better height would be 100 centimeters, make it a full meter, or somewhere in between perhaps. It kind of depends on what you're using this for. If you're doing sort of a half-life size figure, you're going to want a lower base. But if you're doing a portrait bust, you're going to want a higher base. I think doing a meter minimum for your base is good for a portrait bust, if you're used to working on your portraits standing up, which is what I do. So those are those 2 pieces. The 2 pieces on the left are the base pieces, and then the 2 pieces on the right, they are identical pieces, and those are going to be the I don't know, what do you call them? The extensions. It's what's going to make this tripod adjustable in height, and it's going to be a lot easier just to show you what's going on rather than explain it. So now that you have those 4 pieces cut out, you'll notice on those pieces, I've also drawn these sort of lines that go partially through the center of each piece. We're going to cut along those lines too, but we're not just going to make a saw cut. We need to cut out sort of a slot. And the width of that slot is going to be determined by the dimensions of the particle board you're using, or the plywood that you're using. You want to make those slots basically exactly the width of your material. So my material is 22 millimeters, so I'm going to cut a 22 millimeter slot. Now, on the pieces on the left that you see, the parts that are going to be the extenders for the tripod, the line that I've drawn is basically 55 centimeters, and the entire piece is 75 centimeters, so leaving the top 20 centimeters uncut. You're going to make that notch 55 centimeters long, centered in the middle of the piece. Those pieces are 20 centimeters across, and so I got a center line drawn at 10 centimeters, and then I'm going to go 11 millimeters on either side of that line to make a 22 millimeter slot. Now, on the pieces on the right for the base, same thing. It's going to start in the middle, but you see that one slot starts at the bottom of the piece, and the other slot starts at the top. Now, these pieces are 80 centimeters long, and so what I'm going to do is make each of these slots 40 centimeters long. So if you vary the length, if you vary the height of your base, let's say you want to make it 90 centimeters tall, basically you divide that number in half and make each slot 45 centimeters. Alternatively, you could make one side 40 centimeters and the other side 50 centimeters. It doesn't matter as long as the total is equal to the height of the base. And again, you want to cut these right down the center, these notches, exactly as wide as the thickness of your material. Okay, so cutting these grooves here, these slots, is kind of the most crucial step. You want these to be nice and precise, right? So, and of course, as I mentioned, the cut needs to be, the groove needs to be exactly the thickness of the piece of material you're using. So I'm using stuff that is 22 millimeters, so this is as close to a 22 millimeter slot that I can cut with a jigsaw. But after I've cut it, what you want to do is test it by just taking a piece of scrap and seeing if you can run it through. And it should be nice and snug. You shouldn't have to use a hammer to get it in, and it certainly shouldn't be too big. That's the big thing. You don't want it too big, but it should be nice and firm like that, going all the way down. You know, test it, make sure that it's going to work. It's a little bit stiff. I'm running into a little bit of resistance somewhere here, so what I'm going to use is a file to very, very slightly open this groove so that this piece can go in with just a little bit of pressure, but no wiggle. See how that locks in? We're going to be able to make the base of this tripod with no hardware at all. It's just going to come right in and right out, making it collapsible when you're not using it. Then once you get the second piece cut, the one with the slot at the top, and you get it properly sized, all you need to do is then sort of fit one into the other. Like that. Do that here. All the way down. Look at that. Look at that. Look how stable it is. No wiggle. Solid. Now the next thing you want to do is take your two base pieces apart again, and then do you see what I've done? I've drawn a triangle at the base of one of my pieces, 30 centimeters across and 20 centimeters high, two triangles, and basically you're going to cut those out. And that serves two purposes. One is that we actually need those two triangles, those two pieces of wood for our next step. And B, if you have a straight, flat base like it is now, and if there's any sort of imperfection in your floor, then you're going to get a little bit of wiggle in the space. They're not going to be able to sit as nicely as they will if your feet are a little bit smaller and you take away material from the center. So you can see after I've cut, that's what I've got. Now I've got sort of two legs on this base. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other half of the base as well. But those pieces I'm going to discard. The ones that you saw in the previous picture that are marked 20 and 15, you want to save those. You want to save those two triangles. So after you've made those notches in your extender pieces, you can see what I'm doing here. You just sort of slot them onto the base after you've put the base back together. And that's how they're going to sit. You can see you want to pinch them tight so they're snug to the base like that. we're going to attach the top of the tripod directly to the tops of these two extensors. And so we're going to need a little bit of extra support. And that's where those two little triangles you just cut out come into play. What you want to do is take each extender off the base and then screw from one side, attaching these triangles to the base. And you can see that the triangles are 20 centimeters to the side that they're being attached to the extender, and you should have 20 centimeters between the top of your base and the top of your extender. Then the next thing you're going to do is attach the tabletop to the tripod. Again, I had to use another piece of wood. This is about, I think, 35 centimeters to a side, something like that. You can go bigger or smaller, whatever you like. And it's just attached by sinking a bunch of screws right through the top and into the support triangles and the tops of the extensors. Pretty simple. And now the last thing you're going to do is you're going to drill a series of holes that will enable the extenders to extend the height of your tripod. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to turn the thing on its side, and you're going to clamp the two sides, the two extender pieces, to the part of the base which sort of runs through the center of them, as you can see in the picture. You're going to clamp them, but you're going to sort of adjust it so that the tripod is not all the way down. It's not in its lowest position. You're going to sort of pull it up so it's maybe an inch or so, 3 or 4 centimeters higher than its lowest position. And in that final position, this is what you're going to do. You're going to drill a couple holes all the way through all 3 pieces. All right. Doing that enables you to then put a pin through those 3 holes, and that means once that pin is through all 3 pieces of wood, of course, then the tripod is going to maintain its height. And all you need to do is then drill a series of holes at whatever height you're going to need the tripod to be at, and then you just put in a pin. So obviously you want to drill a nice, fairly sizable hole so that whatever you're using as a pin, whether it's a bolt or a piece of steel rod or Allen wrenches. I've seen people use screwdrivers, all sorts of things. Any sort of good solid piece of metal that you can jam through all 3 of those holes is going to do. This is the one sort of annoying aspect of this design, is lining up those 3 holes perfectly takes a little bit of getting used to. Drilling the holes is the easy part, but then later aligning them so that your pin goes right through, it takes a little bit of getting used to, and it's certainly not going to be something you're going to want to do with a sculpture on the tripod. You're going to have to take the sculpture off to readjust the height whenever you need to do that. And of course, one last thing that I forgot to mention, you need to drill this hole on each side of the extender. So you're going to use 2 tripod pins in order to adjust the height, right? So 1 hole in each side. And that's it. That's all you need to do. You can see here in the picture that the tripod is adjusted so it's 3 or 4 inches above its lowest setting, and you can go as high as feels stable. One thing, though, as you can see in the video here, there's a lot of wiggle between the 2 extender pieces and the base, which runs through the center of those extender pieces. This wiggle is easily solved just by basically clamping those 3 pieces of wood together with my little red clamps that you saw in the previous picture. So for the tripod, necessary equipment will be 2 clamps, 1 for each side of the extensors. And once it's clamped, though, you get a very, very solid tripod. I'm actually quite happy with this. And yes, I know I've been using the word tripod, and this has 4 feet. But I think you get the drift. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this works. And if anyone comes up with any sort of better design, any sort of improvement on this design, I would love to hear about it. Any way that we can make this design better or cheaper. I don't know how it could be cheaper. I did mine for free. I'd love to hear about it. By the way, the only tools that I used for this throughout the entire thing, I used the scrap wood that you saw. I used about 15 screws. I used 2 tripod pins. And then the tools that I used were actually just a jigsaw, a drill, and a wood rasp. And that's it. So I hope this works for you, and thanks for watching.